Okay, so let's get right into this. This is one of those geopolitical stories that starts out looking like a pretty standard trade deal. But when you peel back the layers, you find a much bigger, much more calculated strategic game being played. One that could redraw alliances all across the globe.
Imagine a trade deal, 25 years in the making, just left for dead overnight. Well, that's what we're digging into. It's a story of high-stakes global trade, some serious geopolitical chess, and a really clever strategic maneuver that has thrown everything into chaos. We're looking at how the EU and the US are battling for influence in South America, with Argentina caught smack in the middle. And this is the result. This is how analysts are now describing a massive EU trade agreement, a zombie deal. I mean, think about that. It's technically alive, but for all practical purposes, it's just dead on its feet. A truly shocking turn of events for what was supposed to be this huge landmark partnership. So the big question is, how did we get here, right? How does a trade pact that took a quarter century to build suddenly just flatline? That's the mystery we're unpacking. And the answer? Well, it involves a desperate hunt for cash, a new president with a, let's say, radical approach, and a brilliantly executed strategic play.
And this image, well, it just says it all, right? It perfectly captures the disruptive, almost chaotic energy behind this new agreement. And it's sending some serious shockwaves from Buenos Aires all the way to Brussels, setting the stage for a major clash in global trade.
Now, the timing here is absolutely everything. So on January 17th, after literally a quarter century of back and forth, the EU finally seals this landmark deal with South America's Mercosur bloc. Huge news. But then, just 19 days later, Argentina turns around and signs its own major pact with the United States. You have two massive deals, signed weeks apart, that are now on a direct collision course.
So what is this ARTI deal? Well, on the surface, it's sold as a modernized partnership to boost trade. But you start reading the fine print, and its true objective seems to be something else entirely. To surgically align Argentina with US economic and security interests, basically pulling it firmly into Washington's orbit. And that leads to this fascinating question. Was this all just a happy coincidence? Or was one deal strategically designed to neutralize the other? You know, could this US-Argentina pact actually be a poison pill meant to turn that huge EU-Mercosur agreement into a zombie? Now, I'm not just making that term up. Analysts are literally calling this a potential zombie agreement. It's a real concept. It's when a deal is signed, it's on the books, it exists on paper, but it's totally dead in the water. It can't be enforced, it can't be implemented, usually because it's tangled up in other conflicting promises. So it's alive, but not really. So welcome to what's being called the pincer maneuver. This is a story of how one country's desperate need for cold, hard cash, specifically US dollars, could be the very thing that mummifies a historic European trade pact, putting it on ice for good.
At first glance, this new US-Argentina deal, which they're calling ARTI, it looks like a run-of-the-mill partnership. But analysts, they're calling it something else entirely, a pincer maneuver. Now that's a military term, for an attack from two sides. And that suggests this deal has a hidden, almost surgical objective.
Right. So when you hear the term poison pill, you know this isn't about building a new friendship. It's designed to do the opposite. The deal itself might be intentionally crafted to sabotage or maybe even kill something else entirely.
So that's the big question we're tackling here. What is really going on? Let's start peeling back the layers and dig into the fine print of this agreement to see what's actually hiding in there.
Okay, so let's get into the evidence. To really understand the strategy here, you have to look at the actual language of the deal. And what you find is that it's not a typical free trade agreement. No, analysts are calling it an asymmetrical regulatory alignment, which is a fancy way of saying it's a deal where the rules and the obligations are deliberately, completely unbalanced between the two partners.
And this slide really tells you everything you need to know about the power dynamic. The language is so revealing. Look at this. For Argentina, the text is binding. It says Argentina shall do this. Argentina shall do that. It's mandatory. But for the US, the language gets a lot softer. The United States shall work with Argentina. It's conditional. This is not a partnership of equals. It is a textbook case of what experts call asymmetrical reciprocity.
And those commitments from Argentina, they're not small.
We're talking about deep, fundamental changes. They're agreeing to accept specific U.S. regulatory standards, completely overhaul their own intellectual property laws, grant market access, and even align their national security policies with Washington. This is way more than a trade deal. It's a deep economic and security integration. And when you lay it all out like this, you really start to see the potential downside for Argentina. The country is effectively signing away some of its sovereignty, tying its own hands on raising revenue from certain taxes, and potentially flooding its market in a way that could hurt its own industries. Oh, and on top of all that, it puts Argentina in direct violation of the rules of its own trading bloc, Mercosur.
So you have to be asking yourself, why? Why would Argentina sign a deal that seems so lopsided? The answer, in one word, is money, or more specifically, US dollars. Argentina is in a desperate race against time to get its hands on them. Just let this number sink in for a second. This was the recent estimated state of Argentina's central bank net reserves. That's right, negative $11 billion. They are in a full-blown cash crisis. And the pressure is only mounting. This number, that's the amount of debt repayments Argentina is facing in 2026 alone, $20 billion, that they simply do not have. And looming over all of it is this giant figure, the roughly $55 billion Argentina still owes to the International Monetary Fund. The IMF is their single biggest creditor. The pressure is absolutely immense, and that new US deal is being seen as a tactical and maybe their only lifeline.
You see, this deal, it isn't really about long-term trade strategy for Argentina. It's an economic survival tool. It's a tactical lifeline thrown by Washington designed to do one thing: get dollars flowing into the country immediately to stop a complete financial collapse.
So now that we understand the desperate motive, we can circle back to that whole poison pill idea. If this deal is the poison, then who or what was it meant to take out? And here it is. The real target. The US-Argentina pact seems to have been designed to neutralize that landmark agreement between the European Union and the South American Mercosur bloc. But how exactly does it do that?
Let's start with something we can all understand: cheese. Let's call it the Parmesan problem. The EU deal is built on protecting the names of European foods. It means Argentina would have to stop its own producers from calling their cheese feta or gorgonzola. But the US deal explicitly says Argentina cannot stop American companies from using those exact same names. It is a legal impossibility, a total deadlock. Then you've got this idea of standard locking. Think of it like this. The US deal forces Argentina to accept American safety standards for cars and drugs as being good enough, no questions asked. That creates a frictionless superhighway for American goods. Meanwhile, European companies, which use different EU standards, are suddenly stuck in the slow lane. They'd have to do all this expensive, redundant testing just to compete. And this is where it gets really interesting from a geopolitical angle. There's a national security clause in the US deal, Article 4.1, that requires Argentina to basically mirror American security measures. This could effectively give Washington a backdoor veto over Argentina's trade with other countries, including anyone in the EU if it's seen as a security risk.
And here, ladies and gentlemen, is the smoking gun. This table shows clear as day how the two deals are legally incompatible. Look at the first line. Under the US deal, Argentina must allow American companies to use terms like Parmesan. But under the EU deal, Argentina must ban anyone outside of Europe from using that exact same name. It's a direct contradiction. They literally cannot honor both agreements at the same time. And you see similar head-on collisions with regulatory standards and security policies.
And the end result of all this is, well, it's a total mess. It's what's being called a regulatory squeeze. Argentine agencies would literally have to manage two completely different, contradictory sets of rules for the same products. An American car would have to follow one set of laws, and a German car would have to follow another. It's a bureaucratic nightmare that's basically designed to make one of these deals completely unworkable.
And just like that, this conflict effectively turns that massive EU-Mercosur deal into what analysts are calling a zombie agreement. I mean, it exists on paper, it's been signed and everything, but the US-Argentina pact has sucked the life right out of it, making it pretty much unenforceable.
But look, this whole maneuver isn't just about dollars and regulations. It's also being driven by a really powerful ideological alignment. What we're seeing is a major strategic pivot in how Argentina sees its place in the world. I mean, you're looking at two completely different philosophies of global trade right here. The US deal is all about aligning with one superpower in a partnership that isn't exactly equal. The EU deal, on the other hand, is about regional solidarity, about blocs working together to create a more balanced, multipolar world. And at the heart of this is President Milei's very particular worldview. His brand of libertarianism is just much more comfortable with the American style of capitalism, where big players can dominate a market. And that's a world away from the EU's model, which is all about using strict regulations to make sure there's always fair competition. So, how could this torpedo strategy actually play out? Well, as you can see, he has a lot of moves he can make. He can enforce that GI poison pill on food names we just talked about. He can lock the country into US-only standards, which creates huge barriers for European companies. He could even use the security shields from the ARTI deal to block EU investments. Or, and this is maybe the simplest option of all, he can use the legislative deep freeze. Just let the EU treaty gather dust and never even bring it to a vote. ARTI gives him all the leverage he needs to do any of it. And the stakes here could not be higher. There is a real chance this works out. The US deal could bring in a flood of dollars, Argentina avoids default, and it becomes an amazing comeback story. But there's also an equal chance it leads to a strategic standoff, isolating Argentina from Europe and other key partners for a long time. And then there's that other, very real risk, that the cash just doesn't arrive fast enough, triggering the exact economic collapse they're trying so desperately to avoid. But regardless of which of these scenarios plays out in the short term, the big picture is becoming crystal clear. What we are witnessing is a fundamental strategic pivot. Argentina is shifting its entire geopolitical orbit away from the European model of strategic autonomy and toward a model of security integration with Washington. And what this means, at the end of the day, is that the EU-Mercosur deal, this project that took decades of work, is almost certainly going to remain a zombie. Signed, sealed, but never delivered. Mummified by the immediate, desperate need for the dollar. And that leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought to chew on. Was this a brilliant, pragmatic move for economic survival by a country on the brink, or was it a high-stakes gamble that simply traded one form of dependency for another, with consequences we'll be watching unfold for years to come?
So a deal gets torpedoed. What's the big deal? Well, the fallout from this strategic move could be huge. And not just for Argentina. It has major implications for the future of South America and for how global trade alliances work, period.
This whole situation seems to point to a new strategic philosophy, sometimes called the Carney Doctrine. The basic idea is that the old era of a single global rules-based system is fading. In a new world with competing giants or hegemons, smaller powers and regional blocs have to get smart and form new coalitions, otherwise they risk getting forced to choose a side or get crushed in the middle.
One possible future that's being floated is something called a two-speed Mercosur. The idea is that the bloc could kind of formally split. So on one track, you'd have countries like Brazil and Uruguay who decide to move forward with the EU. And on the other track, you'd have countries like Argentina and Paraguay who pivot and focus on their alignment with the US.
So this wouldn't just be a simple breakup, it would be a strategic realignment. It would allow some members to go ahead and build their bridge to Europe while leaving the others to drift firmly into the US economic orbit. It's about creating new, maybe more pragmatic partnerships out of the ashes of the old bloc.
At the end of the day, this story is about so much more than a single trade dispute. It's a potential blueprint for the future of global trade. We could be seeing a huge shift away from those big, clunky, multilateral blocs towards smaller, more agile alliances. And it's a stark reminder of how desperate domestic pressure, like needing cash fast, can completely reshape a country's place in the world.
And all this leaves us with a really tough question, doesn't it? As the world seems to be reordering itself around these powerful economic and political giants, is that old dream of global cooperation dead? In this new world, is picking a side and building a fortress the only way for smaller nations to survive? It's a thought that really challenges the foundation of our global system, and it makes you wonder what's coming next.